One of my favorite things to do at the end of painting with watercolor is to use a white gel pen to add on some fun details. And one of the most common questions I get along with that is, which gel pen do I use? Because gel pens can be finicky, to say the least. And my current favorite one is this Uniball Signo white gel pen. But after reading so many different comments about what's the best white gel pen, I thought we should actually put it to the test. And there are a ton of white gel pens out there. A lot of them are from brands that seem to pop up and then go away. So instead, I bought 5 different ones from brands that are recognizable art supply or office supply brands that I know will always be there and not just kind of pop up and disappear. The ones we're going to test today are the Pentel Milky Pop, Pilot G2, probably the OG, the Jelly Roll, Marie's, and then my current favorite, which is the Uni Signo one. So I'm hoping that this is the winner, but I won't know until I try them out. I'm going to test them and I'm going to rate them. I'm going to rate them on coverage, and I'm going to be testing them on both black paper, and then I've also pre-prepared some watercolor paper with some color because I most commonly use them on top of watercolor. And in the testing, not only am I going to be looking at how well it actually covers and shows up white, I'm going to be looking for reliability, because how hard you have to press with them, or how much coverage they actually have, or if they just stop working altogether, because I've had that problem with white gel pens before, and it's not fun when that happens, so I want to make sure that I can suggest the one that is the most reliable. And the final rating I'm going to give them is going to be their quality versus their price point. At the very end, we're also going to do a couple fun things. The first is I'm going to give you some general tips that will help you make your gel pens work better for you. And then in addition to that, we're going to play a little bit of a guessing game. I'm going to take our top 3 from the testing. I'm going to make the same thing 3 times, and then I'm going to show you all 3 of them, and you can try to guess which pen goes with which painting. Let's get to testing. I'm excited because I like testing and swatching. For this very first test, I've got some black watercolor paper, and I'm just going to make a couple lines and write the names with the pen. We're going to start with the Pentel Milky Pop, and this one actually came with 2 pens in the package, and the first one did not work. Now, when it was shipped, even though it was in a sealed container, that pen cap was not on it tightly, so it must have dried out. I don't know, because the other one did work, and it worked pretty well. Pretty nice smooth lines, and it felt quite nice when I was writing with it. Next up, we have the Pilot G2, and this one writes very smoothly. However, it has a really unique property to it, where you put it down and it looks nice and bright, and then it just kind of sinks into the paper, and it does not have as much color, which is a little unfortunate because it does feel very nice to write with. Third up, Jelly Roll. This is probably the one most people are familiar with. Right off the bat, it works pretty well. It has a very nice bright color to it, and it's fairly smooth. There's some slight inconsistencies with how much color is placed down, but overall I like this one. And then on to Marie's. This is a brand that I've used their watercolor before, but I've never used any of their pens before, so I'm curious about. And overall, pretty disappointed. It is a lot lighter in color. It does not write as nicely. It's not very smooth, and there's quite a few inconsistencies. Not only that, but at one point, it basically stopped working during the line. And then the final one here is my Uni Signo. This is the one that I'm a little biased to because it's the one I use all the time. And as expected, it worked well, nice and bright, and very smooth to write with. Now that I have them all here, I'm going to give them a rating on this black paper. For both the Jelly Roll and the Uni Signo, I think I'm going to give them both 9s. A 10 in my book for this test would be that I could not see any of the black paper, and it was super duper bright, and everything was absolutely smooth. I don't think we have any 10s here, but I do think that the Jelly Roll and the Uni Signo both earn 9s in this category because they're both really bright and fairly smooth in application. When I first put the Pentel down, I was pretty disappointed with the color because it was a lot lighter than what I wanted it to be. But as it sits here, it's not that bad, and it was very smooth to write with, and I'm kind of wondering if the color of it is lighter because the nib on it was smaller. I'm going to give it an 8 because I do think it could be a lighter color, but it was pretty good still. The Pilot on the black paper, I'm going to give a 4. It was very smooth, and I'm kind of sad to give it this rating, but that color just sunk in so much that you really lose all of the white gel pen. It's kind of more like a light gray color. The Marie's, I'm going to give a 3. It was choppy and also not very pigmented. Using white gel pens on black paper is not my most common use case. My most common use case is actually using it on top of watercolor. So I've prepared 2 pages in this book, one with a lighter color and then one with a darker color, because I want to know how they perform on watercolor and on different colors. On the pink side, the Pentel is nice and smooth, and it actually seems to show up pretty well. It's lighter, but that's also to be expected because the background is lighter. The Pilot, on the other hand, it is very hard to see. It just kind of really sinks in, and it's a shame. This one writes so smooth. I do wish that I could see it more. The Jelly Roll performed almost exactly how it did on the black paper, other than the background color. Nice and smooth, nice bright whites. The Marie's, again, it disappointed me, and it basically ran out. I don't even want to continue testing this, but for the sake of the video, I'm going to continue it throughout, but at this point, I can pretty much rule out this pen as being the best. Then the Unisigno, this one is nice and bright. There are some inconsistencies, however, in the application with the direction that the pen moves, and you do get some choppy lines, so that's not ideal, but it is hard to beat how bright that white color is. For the ratings, the Pentel Milky Pop, I'm going to give an 8. For the Pilot, I'm going to give a 5. For the Jelly Roll, I'm going to give this one a 9. It was nice and smooth and bright white. The Marie's, I'm going to give it a 1 because it showed up. And the Unisigno, I am going to deduct 1 point because it was a little more choppy than the Jelly Roll was. Now onto the black side of this paper, and I'm going to get you a little bit closer so you can see the application a little bit better. This Pentel Milky Pop actually came out really nicely, and I think it looked really good with this background color. It was very smooth to write with and very consistent. The Pilot G2, and again, I really wish this one showed up a bit more because this is the smoothest one to write with. It does just feel so good on the paper, but just not very much color. The Jelly Roll is continuing its trend, being nice and bright, but also fairly smooth. The Marie's surprisingly performed a little better on this one than it did on the previous 2 tests, but it still kind of ran out and was a bit choppy, and overall, not my favorite. The Unisigno, again, a little bit of choppiness, but some really bright white colors. For these ones, I'm going to give the Pentel an 8, the Pilot a 7, Jelly Roll a 9, Marie's a 5, and the Unisigno an 8. And now for our final test, we're actually going to take coverage really literally, and I'm going to try to completely color in some different squares. Starting off with the Pentel, it has fairly decent coverage, but when you try to go over other areas, it's harder to get more saturation of that color in some areas, but overall, pretty decent. The Pilot, again, it does that sink. It just really sinks into this paper. I think it could be better, but again, really smooth coverage. The Jelly Roll really has a ton of coverage, and it's also buildable, so once area is dry, you're able to get more of that color in some areas. The Marie's actually did a little bit better than it had in the other tests. Maybe it just kind of needed to warm up, but it still didn't do super great. It's a little bit brighter than the Pilot, but still not very good. And then the Unisigno, again, this one has a pretty nice smooth coverage, and it is buildable kind of like the Jelly Roll and has nice bright white colors. For these, I'm going to give the Pentel a 7, Pilot a 5, Jelly Roll a 9, Marie's a 6, and the Unisigno a 9 as well. Before we can tally all the coverage and reliability scores to get us an average, I do also want to talk about the cost/quality. Now, each of these pens is relatively the same cost because they really only range from about $2 to $3.25 per pen, but it's still good to know. So the Pentel is approximately $3 a pen, and I'm going to give this one an 8 rating because I think it's a nice construction and it scored pretty well across the board. And I also love pens that have a little grip on here, so I'm going to make sure that it's up there in the quality/cost scale. When I bought the Pilot G2, it was about $3.25 for this single pen, and it is nicely constructed. However, it did not perform super well in a lot of the tests, so I do have to knock it down just a little bit, but I'm still going to give it a 7 because it's a nice, solidly built pen. The Jelly Roll is about $2 per pen, so it's a pretty good deal for what it is because it performed really well across all of the tests. Now, I'm not going to give it a 10 because it It does not have the grip that I like, and the body shape of it is very basic. It is solidly constructed, but it is kind of missing some of the bells and whistles that I do like on a pen, but it's very iconic shape. This is really recognizable as a Jelly Roll pen, so I'm still going to give it a 9, but I would love a grip on it. The Maries cost me about $2.25 per pen, and it has a very similar, it's trying to be the Jelly Roll in how it looks, but it does not perform. It's actually even more than the Jelly Roll, as well as the packaging isn't quite as cute. Like the pen cap is a lot thinner. I'm going to give it a 1 because I don't really think it's worth any money because it did so poorly, and it's also not a very special pen. And then finally, the Uni Signo. This is one where I am going to give this a 10 because I do just really like the construction of this pen. It performed really well, and it just has a very solid feel to it, and it has a very nice grip on it that I like to use. So I'm going to give that one a 10. But what does this mean for their overall scores? Let's tally it up and see what the winner is. My overall winner for this test is the Jelly Roll with 9 points. The Uni Signo does come in just behind it at 8.8. I think that these two are very similar, and it would just kind of come down to preference when you're actually using it. They both perform really, really well. In third place is the Pentel. This one was a surprise to me. I did not expect this one to perform quite as well as it did. I don't think it quite gets anywhere near the Jelly Roll or the Uni Signo, but it works pretty good. It gets 7.8 points. From there, the Pilot gets 5.6 points, and Marie's comes in with 3.2 points. And now to the last two things we're going to do. The first of which is our little guessing game, and then after that, I'm going to show you a couple little tips and tricks to make the most of the pen that you're using, because there are some ways to use it that will make it more effective. I painted a sheet with some different green colors, and then I drew the same thing more or less 3 different times. Now in the comments, what I want you to do is try to guess which brand painting number 1 is, painting number 2 is, and then painting number 3. I would also love to know what your favorite is, and then if you got your guesses correctly. Here is painting number 1, painting number 2, and painting number 3. I did these with the top 3 pens because I didn't really think the other 2 were worth including in here because it would be pretty obvious which they were. It's probably pretty obvious which the Pentel one is because it does have a different look than the other 2. Alright, now we're going to flip them over. Did you guess right? Number 1 was Uni Signo. Number 2 was the Pentel Milky Pop. And number 3 was the Jelly Roll. One final thing before we wrap this up, I do just want to share with you a few tips and tricks that I've found that help when you're actually using these, because the application is key. If you try to push too hard and you are pushing straight up and down, it's going to leave a little divot and you're going to get more application around the sides and just not overall great coverage. What you actually want to do is push less hard and also hold the pen at a little bit of an angle. You kind of want to drag it so that the white gouache or whatever is on the inside of these pens kind of falls out and lays on the page. Notice that on this stroke, as I pull it across and I'm using a much lighter touch, I'm just letting that ball glide across the paper, more of that color actually comes out. The same thing goes if I'm trying to actually color in an area. If I push really, really hard, I'm not actually depositing very much of that color down. A light touch, I can really get a ton of that to come out. Your test might vary from mine, but in my opinion, either the Uni Signo or the Jelly Roll are the best white gel pens out there, and you really can't go wrong with either of these. This one I have used for quite a bit of time, so I know it also works for an extended period of time. I've had white gel pens in the past that have dried up on me. I don't know about this one. Have you tried the Jelly Roll? Do you like it? It seems like it could work really well, but I can't speak to its longevity because I've only had it for a little bit of time. Thank you so much for watching this video. If it was helpful to you, please consider giving me a thumbs up and leaving me a comment on what your favorite white gel pen is. And I hope that you have a great day.